The morning sun barely crept over the horizon when Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport truck at Fort. Her small frame and quiet demeanor immediately drew skeptical glances from the other recruits. At barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, she looked more like someone heading to college than someone entering one of the military's most demanding training programs. The drill sergeant's voice boomed across the training ground as the new batch of recruits lined up. "Welcome to advanced tactical training, soldiers. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you're smart. Most of you are about to discover you're neither." His eyes swept across the line, pausing momentarily on Sarah before moving on with what seemed like dismissive indifference. Sarah kept her eyes forward, her jaw set with determination. She had grown up in a small town in Texas where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Military service wasn't just her dream, it was her only path to a better life. She had scored exceptionally high on all her aptitude tests, but she knew that wouldn't matter much here where physical prowess and mental toughness under pressure were everything. The first week proved brutal for everyone, but Sarah faced additional challenges. During combat drills, her training partner, a muscular recruit named Jackson, would openly complain about being paired with her. "This is supposed to be elite training, not babysitting duty," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. The comment drew chuckles from nearby recruits, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. During weapons training, she excelled with precision shooting but struggled with the heavier equipment. When it came time to carry the squad automatic weapon during a field exercise, she stumbled under its weight while crossing a creek. The splash sent water flying, and several recruits burst into laughter. "Maybe you should try the Girl Scouts instead," someone called out. Even the instructor seemed amused, shaking his head as he marked something on his clipboard. The obstacle courses proved equally challenging. While Sarah could navigate the technical aspects with ease, her smaller stature made certain physical challenges nearly impossible. During rope climbing exercises, she would make it 3/4 of the way up before her grip failed. Each fall brought more snickers from her fellow trainees. "She's holding back the whole unit," she overheard another recruit telling his buddies during chow time. What made it worse was that Sarah genuinely liked most of her fellow trainees as people. Outside of training, many of them were kind and funny. But the pressure of the program seemed to bring out their need to identify the weak link, and she had inadvertently become their target. She understood their frustration. In real combat situations, everyone's life depended on every team member performing at their best. The psychological warfare exercises were where things really intensified. During a simulated prisoner interrogation, Sarah was subjected to hours of pressure tactics. The instructors used every perceived weakness against her, focusing on her size, her gender, and her working-class background. "Your daddy fixed cars because he couldn't cut it anywhere else," one interrogator sneered. "Just like his little girl." But something interesting happened during these sessions. While other recruits eventually broke under the psychological pressure, Sarah seemed to find an inner steel that surprised everyone, including herself. She would sit silently, her dark eyes never wavering, absorbing every insult and threat without giving the interrogators what they wanted. The instructors pushed harder, but she remained unmoved. During hand-to-hand combat training, her size disadvantage was obvious. But Sarah had been scrappy her whole life, and she approached each session as a learning opportunity rather than a chance to prove herself through brute force. She studied her opponent's movements, looking for patterns and weaknesses. When paired with Martinez, a recruit who outweighed her by 70 pounds, she managed to use his momentum against him, sending him tumbling to the mat. The move was clean and technical, but instead of respect, it earned her accusations of getting lucky. The urban warfare simulations presented unique challenges. The training facility featured mock buildings and streets designed to replicate combat zones overseas. During these exercises, teams had to work together to clear buildings, rescue hostages, and complete objectives while under simulated enemy fire. Sarah's small size actually proved advantageous in tight spaces, and her attention to detail helped her spot threats that others missed. However, her teammates were often reluctant to rely on her input. During one exercise, she noticed movement in a window that suggested an enemy position. When she tried to alert her team leader, he waved her off. "Focus on keeping up, Martinez. Let the real soldiers handle the tactical stuff." Minutes later, their team was eliminated by fire from that exact position. The instructors observed everything but rarely intervened in the social dynamics between recruits. This was considered part of the training, learning to work with difficult personalities, and proving yourself under adverse conditions. Sarah understood this, but it didn't make the daily humiliations any easier to bear. 3 weeks into the program, during a particularly demanding field exercise, Sarah's squad was tasked with a night reconnaissance mission. They had to infiltrate a mock enemy compound, gather intelligence, and exfiltrate without being detected. The exercise was designed to test everything they had learned about stealth, teamwork, and mission planning. Sarah found herself assigned to the rear guard position, essentially the least important role in the mission. As her squad moved through the darkened training area, she noticed something the others had missed. The enemy's patrol pattern had a gap that occurred every 12 minutes, a window that could allow them to access their objective more directly. When she tried to radio this information to the team leader, she was told to maintain radio silence unless it was an emergency. Frustrated but disciplined, she continued with her assigned role. The squad took the longer, more dangerous route, and while they completed the mission, they were nearly detected twice and finished well over the time limit. Later, during the debrief, the instructor asked why they hadn't taken advantage of the obvious gap in the enemy patrol pattern. The team leader looked confused, and it was only then that Sarah spoke up to explain what she had observed. The instructor's eyebrows raised slightly, and he made a note on his evaluation sheet, but said nothing further. These small moments of recognition were rare, but they kept Sarah going. She began to develop a reputation among the instructors, if not among her fellow recruits, as someone who saw things others missed. Her tactical awareness was exceptional, even if her physical capabilities were limited. The social isolation was perhaps the hardest part. During downtime, recruits would cluster together, sharing stories from home and bonding over their shared struggles. Sarah often found herself on the periphery of these groups, tolerated but not truly included. She would lie in her bunk at night, listening to the quiet conversations around her, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. But she persevered, driven by something deeper than just personal ambition. She carried with her the hopes of her family and her community. Her success in this program could open doors not just for herself, but potentially for her younger sister who was watching her progress with admiration. Failure wasn't just personal, it would confirm every doubt that had been expressed about whether someone like her belonged in elite military training. As the program progressed into its 4th week, the challenges intensified. The instructors seemed determined to find each recruit's breaking point. For many, that point came during the survival training phase, where they were dropped into the wilderness with minimal supplies and expected to find their way back to base while avoiding capture by hunter teams. Sarah's group was dropped in a heavily forested area 30 miles from base. They had basic survival gear, a compass, and a map, but they also had to avoid the instructors who were actively hunting them. The exercise was designed to last 3 days, and failure meant repeating the entire training block. On the first night, her group made camp in what they thought was a concealed location. Sarah had suggested a different spot that offered better natural camouflage, but she was overruled by the group's informal leader. "We need high ground for visibility," he argued, dismissing her concerns about their exposure. At dawn, they woke to find their camp surrounded by instructors. They had been captured within 12 hours of starting the exercise. The humiliation was complete, and as they were marched back to base for their reset, Sarah could see the blame in her teammates' eyes. Somehow, this failure would be attributed to her presence, to the distraction she caused, to her inability to keep up. But something had changed in Sarah during those brief hours in the wilderness. Being captured wasn't the end of her story, it was just another data point in her ongoing education. She had been right about the camp location, and she had been right about the patrol patterns during the previous exercise. The fact that others didn't listen to her didn't make her observations less valid. As they prepared to restart the survival exercise, Sarah made a quiet decision. She would stop trying to prove herself to her fellow recruits and start trusting her own instincts. If they wanted to doubt her capabilities, that was their choice. She would focus on becoming the best soldier she could be, regardless of their opinions. This shift in mindset would prove crucial as the training program moved into its most challenging phase. Unknown to all the recruits, they were about to encounter an evaluation that would test not just their individual skills, but their ability to recognize excellence in unexpected places. The arrival of a visiting colonel would change everything, particularly for the young woman whom everyone had underestimated. The second attempt at the survival exercise began differently for Sarah. Instead of trying to convince her teammates to follow her suggestions, she quietly began implementing her own survival strategy while still contributing to the group effort. When they debated camp locations, she simply began gathering materials for better camouflage regardless of where they decided to settle. When they discussed routes, she memorized alternative paths in case their primary plan failed. This time, her group managed to avoid capture for the full 3 days. Sarah's subtle improvements to their camouflage and her quiet corrections to their navigation helped them reach base successfully. Yet even this success was attributed to collective effort rather than any individual contribution she had made. The other recruits celebrated their achievement, but Sarah noticed how quickly they forgot the small actions that had made the difference. Following the survival exercise, the training program shifted focus to advanced tactical operations. These exercises were designed to simulate real-world scenarios that special operations forces might encounter. The complexity required not just physical capability, but strategic thinking and adaptability under extreme pressure. During a hostage rescue simulation, Sarah's team was tasked with breaching a building held by simulated terrorists. The exercise used non-lethal training ammunition, but the stress and pressure were designed to replicate actual combat conditions. Teams were evaluated on speed, precision, and most importantly, the safety of the hostages. Sarah was assigned to the entry team's rear position, essentially a support role that kept her away from the primary action. As her team stacked up outside the target building, she studied the structure and noticed something concerning. The building's layout didn't match their briefing materials. There was an additional window on the second floor that wasn't shown in their intelligence package. The team leader was focused on executing their planned assault and dismissed her observation. "Stick to your role, Martinez. We've trained for this exact scenario." But Sarah's instincts told her that the additional window represented a potential threat position that could compromise the entire mission. As the team breached the building, Sarah's fears proved correct. Simulated enemy fire erupted from the unidentified window, killing 2 team members and resulting in mission failure. During the after-action review, the instructor highlighted the missed threat, but no one acknowledged that Sarah had identified it beforehand. These experiences began to reveal a pattern that went beyond simple hazing or gender bias. Sarah was developing tactical awareness that exceeded many of her peers, but the command structure of the training environment made it difficult for her contributions to be recognized or utilized effectively. She was caught in a cycle where her lower status prevented her insights from being valued, which in turn reinforced her lower status. The psychological pressure intensified during week 6 when the program introduced stress inoculation training. Recruits were subjected to extreme physical and mental challenges designed to test their breaking points. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, and psychological pressure were combined to create conditions similar to those special operations forces might face in actual combat. During one particularly brutal exercise, recruits were kept awake for 72 hours while completing a series of complex tactical problems. Many of the physically strongest recruits began making critical errors as fatigue set in. But Sarah, drawing on years of working multiple jobs while maintaining high grades in school, seemed to adapt to the sleep deprivation better than expected. While others struggled with basic tasks, she continued to perform complex calculations and tactical assessments with remarkable accuracy. During a map reading exercise conducted in the middle of the second night, she was the only recruit who correctly identified an optimal infiltration route that avoided both natural obstacles and simulated enemy positions. The instructor conducting the exercise, Sergeant Williams, made a note of her performance but said nothing at the time. However, Sarah noticed him studying her more carefully during subsequent exercises. There was a shift in how he evaluated her responses, as if he was beginning to see something that others had missed. The program's 7th week introduced urban combat scenarios that required teams to operate in complex environments with civilian populations. These exercises tested not only tactical skills, but judgment and decision-making under pressure. The scenarios were designed to replicate the ambiguous situations that modern military forces often encountered in overseas operations. During one exercise, Sarah's team was tasked with apprehending a high-value target in a crowded marketplace simulation. The scenario included role players acting as civilians, potential threats, and the target himself. Success required identifying and neutralizing the threat while minimizing civilian casualties and avoiding international incident. As her team moved through the simulated marketplace, Sarah noticed behavioral patterns among the role players that suggested additional threats beyond their primary target. While her teammates focused on their assigned objective, she observed that several civilians were positioning themselves in ways that could facilitate an ambush. When she tried to alert her team leader, he was focused on closing distance to their primary target. "Stay on mission, Martinez. Don't get distracted by the background actors." But Sarah's observation skills, honed through years of watching and listening carefully to understand social dynamics, told her that something was wrong with the scenario. Her instincts proved correct when the exercise erupted into chaos. The additional threats she had identified opened fire, turning what should have been a surgical operation into a firefight with multiple civilian casualties. The exercise was declared a failure, and during the debrief, the instructor emphasized how crucial it was to maintain awareness of the entire tactical environment, not just immediate objectives. Sarah remained silent during the debrief, but she could see the instructor, Captain, watching her carefully. There was something in his expression that suggested he was beginning to understand that she was seeing things others missed consistently, not just occasionally. The psychological evaluations that accompanied the training program began to reflect this pattern as well. While Sarah's physical scores remained in the lower percentiles, her tactical judgment and situational awareness scores were consistently exceptional. The evaluating psychologists noted her ability to remain calm under pressure and her talent for pattern recognition. Dr. Elizabeth, the program's lead psychologist, began conducting additional assessments with Sarah. These sessions went beyond standard psychological evaluations to explore her cognitive processes and decision-making strategies. What she discovered was a mind that processed information differently than most military personnel. "You approach tactical problems like a chess player," Doctor observed during one session. "Most soldiers think 3 moves ahead. You seem to be considering the entire board." Sarah didn't fully understand what this meant at the time, but she was beginning to recognize that her background of careful observation and strategic thinking was translating into military skills that others didn't possess. The training program's 8th week brought the most challenging exercises yet. Teams were given complex missions with multiple objectives that had to be accomplished simultaneously. These exercises required not just individual excellence, but genuine teamwork and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing situations. During a multi-phase operation, Sarah's team was tasked with securing a compound, gathering intelligence, and evacuating friendly personnel, all while under simulated enemy fire. The exercise was designed to last 6 hours and required precise coordination between different elements of the team. Sarah was assigned to the intelligence gathering team, which was considered less prestigious than the assault or security elements. However, this role played to her strengths. While others focused on the physical aspects of the mission, she was responsible for analyzing captured documents, identifying key intelligence, and making strategic assessments. As the exercise progressed, Sarah's intelligence analysis began to reveal that the original mission parameters were based on incomplete information. The compound contained more enemy personnel than briefed, and they were better organized than expected. More importantly, she discovered evidence that suggested the enemy was planning a counterattack that would catch the evacuation team in a vulnerable position. She immediately radioed her findings to the team leader, but received only a brief acknowledgement. The focus remained on completing the original mission objectives rather than adapting to the new intelligence. Sarah found herself in the difficult position of knowing that her team was walking into danger while being powerless to convince them to change their approach. The exercise continued as planned until the simulated enemy counterattack materialized exactly as Sarah had predicted. The evacuation became a desperate fighting withdrawal, and what should have been a successful mission turned into a barely controlled disaster. Multiple team members were killed or wounded, and key objectives were left unaccomplished. During the extensive after-action review, the instructors dissected every decision and outcome. When they reached the intelligence phase, Captain asked pointed questions about the analysis that had been conducted. Sarah provided a detailed breakdown of her findings and the warnings she had attempted to communicate. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The intelligence had been accurate, the warnings had been timely, but the command structure had failed to utilize the information effectively. For the first time, Sarah's fellow recruits began to understand that her contributions were not just lucky guesses, but genuine tactical insights. Staff Sergeant, one of the senior instructors, studied Sarah carefully during the remainder of the debrief. His expression had shifted from polite attention to genuine interest. After the session, he approached her privately. "Martinez, how long have you been analyzing tactical situations like this?" he asked. "I don't know what you mean, Sergeant," Sarah replied honestly. "The intelligence assessment you provided today, that level of analysis typically takes years of field experience to develop. Where did you learn to read situations like that?" Sarah considered his question carefully. "I've always watched people closely, Sergeant. Growing up, it was important to understand what was really happening in any situation, not just what appeared to be happening on the surface." Nodded slowly. "Keep doing what you're doing, Martinez. Some people are starting to notice." His words proved prophetic. Unknown to the recruits, their training program was about to receive a visit from senior leadership that would change everything. The arrival of a distinguished colonel would bring with it an evaluation process that looked beyond physical capabilities to identify genuine tactical potential. And for one underestimated recruit, this visit would finally provide the recognition she had unknowingly been earning all along. The announcement came during the morning briefing of Week 9. Colonel Harrison, a decorated Special Operations veteran, would be visiting to observe the final phase of training and evaluate the program's effectiveness. His reputation preceded him. He was known for his ability to identify exceptional talent and his intolerance for wasted potential. The news sent ripples of excitement and anxiety through the recruit ranks. This was their opportunity to impress senior leadership and potentially influence their future assignments. For most recruits, the colonel's visit represented validation of their hard work and sacrifice. For Sarah, it represented something different. Perhaps her first real opportunity to be evaluated by someone who might recognize the value of tactical intelligence over physical prowess. As she prepared for what would be the most important evaluation of her military career, she had no idea that her reputation had already preceded her to the highest levels of command. Colonel James Harrison arrived at Fort on a crisp Tuesday morning, his reputation preceding him like a shadow. Veterans of multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan spoke his name with a mixture of respect and awe. He had commanded special operations units in some of the most dangerous theaters of operation, and his ability to identify exceptional soldiers was legendary throughout the military community. What the recruits didn't know was that Colonel Harrison had already been briefed on their training program in considerable detail. The instructors had provided him with comprehensive evaluations of every participant, including detailed notes about tactical performance, leadership potential, and adaptability under pressure. Sarah's file was among those that had caught his particular attention. The colonel's first day of observation began with standard physical training assessments. He watched from the sidelines as recruits demonstrated their proficiency in various combat skills. Sarah performed adequately but not exceptionally, confirming what he had read in her physical evaluation reports. However, he noticed something that the written assessments hadn't fully captured: her economy of movement and tactical awareness even during routine exercises. While other recruits focused purely on completing physical tasks, Sarah consistently maintained awareness of her surroundings and her teammates' positions. During a team movement exercise, she instinctively adjusted her position to maintain optimal spacing and coverage, despite this not being the focus of the evaluation. These subtle demonstrations of tactical understanding suggested to Colonel Harrison that there was more to evaluate here than pure physical capability. The second day brought the exercise that would change everything. The colonel had designed a complex tactical scenario that would test not just individual skills, but the ability to analyze and adapt to fluid situations. The exercise involved multiple teams operating in a simulated urban environment with competing objectives and limited information. Sarah's team received their briefing at dawn. Their mission was to locate and secure a high-value asset in a contested urban area while avoiding civilian casualties and minimizing their operational footprint. The scenario was intentionally ambiguous, requiring teams to make critical decisions with incomplete information. Colonel Harrison positioned himself at the exercise control center, where he could monitor all team communications and observe their decision-making processes in real time. What he witnessed during the next 6 hours would fundamentally change his assessment of the training program's effectiveness. As Sarah's team moved into the operational area, they immediately encountered complications not covered in their briefing. The urban environment contained more civilian activity than expected, and intelligence reports suggested additional hostile forces in the area. The team leader struggled to adapt their plan to the changing circumstances. Sarah, monitoring radio communications and observing the tactical situation, began to piece together a comprehensive picture of what was actually happening in their operational area. While her teammates focused on their immediate objectives, she was analyzing patterns in enemy movement, civilian behavior, and tactical opportunities that others were missing. When called for input on their next movement, Sarah provided a detailed assessment that included enemy positions, optimal routes, and timing recommendations based on her analysis of the overall tactical situation. Her recommendations were precise, well-reasoned, and demonstrated understanding of complex operational factors. Colonel Harrison leaned forward in the control center as he listened to Sarah's tactical assessment over the radio. The level of analysis she was providing was sophisticated beyond her training level and experience. She was demonstrating the kind of tactical intuition that typically took years of field experience to develop. The exercise continued with Sarah's team successfully navigating increasingly complex challenges. Each decision point revealed more of her analytical capabilities. When they encountered a roadblock that wasn't in their intelligence package, she quickly identified an alternative route that avoided both enemy positions and civilian concentrations. When suspicious activity suggested the possibility of an improvised explosive device, she recommended a tactical approach that would allow them to investigate safely while maintaining their operational timeline. Her suggestions consistently proved tactically sound and operationally effective. Colonel Harrison began focusing his observations specifically on Sarah's performance. He watched as she processed multiple streams of information simultaneously: radio traffic, visual observations, tactical developments, and synthesized them into coherent strategic recommendations. Her mind was working at a level that impressed even his experienced perspective. During the exercise's climactic phase, Sarah's team faced their most challenging decision. Intelligence indicated that their primary objective might be compromised, but pursuing an alternative approach would require significant deviation from their original plan. The team leader hesitated, unsure how to proceed with such ambiguous information. Sarah requested permission to speak freely and then provided a comprehensive analysis of their options. She had identified 3 possible courses of action, evaluated the risks and benefits of each, and recommended a hybrid approach that maximized their chances of mission success while minimizing exposure to enemy action. Her tactical assessment was delivered with calm professionalism and demonstrated understanding of complex operational factors, including enemy capabilities, civilian considerations, and resource limitations. Colonel Harrison realized he was listening to the kind of analytical briefing he might expect from a seasoned intelligence officer, not a recruit in basic training. The exercise concluded with Sarah's team achieving all their primary objectives while avoiding any simulated casualties. Their success was directly attributable to the tactical decisions recommended by Sarah and implemented by her team leader. The performance was so exceptional that Colonel Harrison requested detailed debriefs with all team members. During Sarah's individual debrief, Colonel Harrison asked probing questions about her analytical process and decision-making methodology. Her responses revealed not just tactical competence, but genuine understanding of strategic principles and operational complexity. She could articulate not just what she had recommended, but why those recommendations were optimal given the circumstances. "Martinez, where did you learn tactical analysis?" Colonel Harrison asked directly. "I didn't learn it anywhere specific, sir. I just try to understand what's really happening in any situation before making decisions about what to do next." The colonel studied her carefully. "What you demonstrated today represents advanced tactical thinking. Most officers don't develop that level of analytical capability until they've commanded in combat. How do you explain that?" Sarah considered his question seriously. "I've always had to pay attention to everything happening around me, sir. Growing up, Understanding people and situations was important for survival. I guess I just apply the same approach to tactical problems. Colonel Harrison made extensive notes during their conversation. What he was documenting was the discovery of genuine tactical talent in an unexpected package. Sarah's ability to process complex information and develop sound tactical recommendations represented the kind of capability that special operations units valued above almost everything else. Following the individual debriefs, Colonel Harrison requested private meetings with the training program's instructors. His questions focused on Sarah's overall performance and their assessment of her potential. The responses confirmed what he had observed: exceptional tactical judgment combined with consistent underestimation by her peers. Staff Sergeant provided the most insightful evaluation. "Sir, Martinez sees things that others miss consistently. Her tactical recommendations are always sound, but she's been operating in an environment where her input isn't valued. The other recruits focus on her physical limitations and miss her intellectual strengths." Captain added, "Her psychological evaluations show exceptional pattern recognition and analytical capability. Doctor believes she processes tactical information differently than most soldiers, in ways that could be extremely valuable in complex operational environments." Colonel Harrison spent the evening reviewing Sarah's complete training file. Her physical scores were indeed below average, but her tactical assessments, psychological evaluations, and instructor observations revealed consistent excellence in areas that mattered most for special operations success. The next morning brought the exercise that would publicly demonstrate what Colonel Harrison had privately discovered. He designed a complex scenario that would require teams to solve tactical problems that had no obvious solutions. The exercise would test analytical capability rather than physical prowess. Teams were presented with a multifaceted operational challenge involving hostage rescue, intelligence gathering, and area denial, all while operating with limited resources and conflicting information. Success would require not just good execution, but creative problem-solving and adaptive thinking. Colonel Harrison announced that he would personally observe all teams during this exercise, and that performance would influence future assignment opportunities. The stakes were clearly established, and every recruit understood that this was their moment to demonstrate their full capabilities. Sarah's team received their briefing and immediately recognized the complexity of their assigned mission. Multiple objectives had to be accomplished simultaneously, resources were insufficient for conventional approaches, and the tactical environment was deliberately ambiguous. As the team struggled to develop a coherent plan, Sarah began analyzing the scenario from a different perspective. Instead of trying to accomplish all objectives through direct action, she identified ways to achieve their goals through coordinated indirect approaches that would be more efficient and less risky. Her analysis revealed that the scenario's complexity was actually an advantage if approached correctly. By sequencing their actions strategically and using tactical deception, they could accomplish all objectives with minimal resources while maintaining operational security. When she presented her assessment to the team, the reaction was different than she had experienced before. Colonel Harrison's presence had elevated everyone's seriousness, and her teammates were more willing to listen to unconventional approaches if they might lead to success. The team leader recognized the sophistication of Sarah's analysis. "Martinez, if we follow your plan and it works, this could be exceptional. If it fails, we'll fail spectacularly. What's your confidence level?" "High confidence, sir. The approach uses the scenario's complexity against itself. We're not fighting the problem, we're using it to our advantage." The team implemented Sarah's strategic approach, and the results were remarkable. They accomplished all objectives efficiently while avoiding most of the tactical challenges that other teams encountered. Their success was so notable that other teams stopped to watch their final actions. Colonel Harrison observed every decision and movement. Sarah's strategic framework was being executed flawlessly, demonstrating not just good planning but excellent tactical judgment. The performance was exceptional by any standard, and it was clearly the result of her analytical approach to the operational challenges. During the exercise debrief, Colonel Harrison asked Sarah to explain her strategic framework to all assembled teams. Her presentation was clear, logical, and demonstrated understanding of advanced tactical principles. The other recruits listened with growing respect and amazement. The key was recognizing that the scenario's complexity was designed to overwhelm conventional approaches, Sarah explained. By analyzing the underlying structure of the challenges, I could identify solutions that were simpler and more effective than direct confrontation. After her presentation, Colonel Harrison stood and addressed the entire group. What you just witnessed represents exceptional tactical analysis. Martinez demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that distinguishes great soldiers from good ones. He paused, studying Sarah carefully before continuing. That level of analytical capability, that ability to see solutions where others see only problems, that tactical intuition, those are the hallmarks of what we call a black viper mark. The training area fell completely silent. Every recruit, every instructor, everyone present understood the significance of those words. Black Viper designation was reserved for soldiers who demonstrated exceptional potential for special operations assignments. It was recognition that opened doors to the military's most elite units. Colonel Harrison continued, Martinez, your performance during this exercise and throughout this training program demonstrates capabilities that are rare and valuable. The physical standards are important, but tactical excellence is what saves lives and wins missions. Sarah stood at attention, barely believing what she was hearing. The same analytical skills that had made her feel different and isolated growing up were being recognized as exceptional military capabilities. The colonel was publicly acknowledging talents that she had never even realized she possessed. Sir, I don't understand what Black Viper designation means, she said honestly. Colonel Harrison smiled slightly. It means, Martinez, that you have the tactical mind we look for in special operations personnel. It means that your real training is just beginning. The transformation in how others viewed Sarah was immediate and complete. Recruits who had dismissed her capabilities now approached her with respect and curiosity. Instructors began evaluating her differently, focusing on her analytical strengths rather than her physical limitations. More importantly, Sarah began to understand her own value and potential. The confidence that came from official recognition allowed her to embrace her unique capabilities rather than trying to conform to others' expectations. She had found her place in the military community, and it was exactly where her talents could make the greatest difference. Colonel Harrison's visit concluded with recommendations that would reshape Sarah's military career. Her assignment to advanced tactical training programs would put her analytical skills to their best use, and her future in special operations would depend on the same intellectual capabilities that had initially made her seem unsuited for military service. The young woman who had endured weeks of doubt and dismissal had become the recruit that senior leadership specifically wanted to develop and deploy. Her journey from underestimated outsider to recognized tactical asset was complete, but her real adventure in military excellence was just beginning.